This is a panel discussion. We're going to be talking about what works for major cities. We've got a great panel, lots of experience and expertise, and they're going to showcase some of the work that they've been doing to address the challenges of how you develop in cities, and what some of those things are that are coming out of that we can learn, and how we can replicate and apply those things in other cities. I just wanted to kind of start with a bit of a preface. If anyone who's attended yesterday, you will know that there was the three mayors that spoke in the beginning on the keynote, and that one of the things that they said is that transport is fundamental to unlock economic growth in cities. And we know that transport and our cities are the economic, or the beating heart of our economy. It's critical that we get this right. Rachel Reeves, in her speech recently, spoke about catalyzing development in cities, and how do we do that, and how do we unlock those things. And some of the things that we're going to talk about today, and some of the things that our panelists are going to talk about, is how they've achieved that. We also got reminded yesterday by Rachel Skinner that we are in breach of our Paris Agreement in terms of decarbonisation and climate change, and we are in fact plus 1.6 degrees right now. So how we do this is important as well, so that we address those things. If we think we've been trying really hard to decarbonise, we have failed, because we're 1.6, we're in breach of the Paris Agreement. So how we do it is critically important. We probably don't have time to dive into that today, but we're going to talk about things that have been done, and how we've managed to unlock development in cities and generate economic growth and drive that through the projects that the members of the panel have done. So I'm Leigh Stolworthy, I forgot to mention that. I'm a Director of Transport at Stantec. I'm an incurable transport planner, have been for as long as I can remember. And we've got a great panel lined up this morning. And I'll allow panelists to introduce themselves, starting on my left.
Good morning, Andrew Linfoot, Director for Landscape Architecture at Jacobs.
Morning everybody, Stacey White, Head of Place and Consents, working on the Mass Transit Programme at the West Yorkshire Combined Authority.
I'm Michael Cowland, I'm an Associate Director working for Tenor and Townsend in their Programme Advisory team.
Morning everyone, Chris Barnes, Network Director for Infrastructure at Transport for Greater Manchester.
And good morning everyone, Ryan Ward, I'm a Lead Director for Regional and Urban Transport at Deloitte.
Thanks. Great panel, range of experience, different perspectives, so lots of information is going to come out, and we'll have a Q&A at the end. It's going to be presentation-based initially, so we'll have presentations from some of the panelists, and thereafter we'll go into a bit of a discussion and a Q&A where you can ask questions. So I think we'll kick off straight away with a presentation by Ryan from Deloitte, who's done great work on a study for transport success across the UK. So Super. We'll hear from Ryan now. Thank you.
Thank you, and I thought I wouldn't use lots of slides, but my secret weapon is a report which I just wanted to talk through, which we're launching today immediately after this event. So there'll be one slide, but let me bring to life what we've done over the last couple of months. So as I said, I'm Ryan Ward, I lead our regional and urban transport sector, all focused on growth in the UK, and I'm really excited to share our regional report. You can get your copies later today. It's about to be published and it's about to go online. It's the regional report which has been sponsored by a colleague you'll all be familiar with, Vernon Everett. And we sort of set out 3 months ago and we said, well, what's happening in regional transport or city-based transport in the UK that our regional leaders are really proud of and would really like to talk about? And what can we learn from what we're doing in pockets of brilliance around the UK? And that's culminated in this report. So let me just talk through some of the major themes that came out. But we stand at an inflection point for transport-led prosperity in the UK, and at Deloitte we're really excited about the opportunity of that. We have one key question we're trying to answer in our report and what we do every day, which is how does regional transport drive economic growth, improve lives, productivity, and great places to work? And we think we're at a pivotal moment in the UK. We've heard that over the last 1.5 days here at Interchange. And we think it's really important to think about this now, because we've had real stagnated growth in the UK nationally and regional disparity over the last 14 or so years. But this new government's given a new focus and new impetus into how transport can be a rapid enabler of growth. And actually, I'm really delighted. I came back to Manchester. I'm a Manchester City season ticket holder. It's a place I love and know very, very well. It's where my mum and dad live, and it's a place that one day I hope my family will come back to if I can persuade them. But there's a lot at stake. And I just looked up before we came here, what's the cost of poor transport connectivity in a city like Manchester, one of our best and most highest growing cities in the UK. And the answer is about an £8.8 billion productivity gap between good transport and bad public transport networks. And if there's anything that this report tells us, it's how to close that productivity gap in the UK and in cities like this. So in short, if we don't get transport right, we don't unlock prosperity. If we do get it right, then our communities will thrive and flourish. So there's an urgency, I think, on the back of some of the things we heard yesterday around why we wrote this report. But we thought we're not starting from scratch, and I said that right at the beginning. Some regions and regional leaders are flying. We've heard great stories over the last few days, and we wanted to codify that. So we went out, and we spoke to 14 transport leaders, commissioners, mayors across the UK, across 12 different transport authorities, and we asked them what's worked. You know, we had great conversations like this. Let's codify it. What's worked? The responses were really inspiring. They sort of told us all the things they were proud of, all the things that have probably wrinkles along the way, and so this report gives us a playbook for action. There's a single slide, and it may or may not come up, but there's 6 key themes as part of a blueprint that our report gives us, and I wanted to just touch on each one of those as we go through over the next 2 or 3 minutes and tell you what we found, because I think that's what most people are interested in. So the first one, what did we find, is that we know that success works where we treat transport as not as an end to itself, but by a means to a greater outcome. So the most successful projects we saw and we spoke about were the enablers of wider change. And so what does that mean for us? It means let's link our investment in transport to things that matter for people and places, so jobs, new homes, communities, development, education, resources. Our report found that we must integrate transport plans with broader economic and social strategies. So a real example of that, we spoke to one combined authority, and this is in the report, so I'm not going to give all the hints and tricks away. Read the report. One transport authority who didn't just upgrade a railway station, but they really re-energized and revitalized a community, an underprivileged community. And those are the stories we were looking for. It has attracted new businesses. The metrics of success were new businesses, new people, new homes in the area, new footfall to the town centre. So the lesson's clear in terms of thinking about overall outcomes, top left. Where we plan transport with a broader vision in mind, we deliver growth beyond the project itself. That was really, really important to all our metro mayors as well. The second thing we looked at, just looking along, is securing the right funding, innovative finance models, so being creative about how we pay for this stuff. I mean, it hasn't escaped anyone's attention over the last few weeks around where we are as an economy and what the Exchequer is really worried about. So even the best ideas need fuel in the tank. So one stark truth that came out of our report and our conversations is that the stop-start funding kills momentum. And so projects stall, and this is one of the pain points where money is uncertain and delays carry huge costs. So what does that mean? What did Metro mayors, what did our leaders of all regional authorities say? They said, for our city-based infrastructure and our growth plans, can we have long-term funding packages so that plans aren't derailed halfway? And because public budgets are tight, we know our regional providers are thinking innovatively. Many of them are thinking about how can we lease assets, form public-private partnerships, new ventures, borrow against future growth in order to bankroll upgrades. And talking to Transport for London, this is in the report, they will tell us how they freed up capital to invest in major tube line upgrades that they simply wouldn't have been able to do without selling and leasing back trains. So ingenuity needs to become the norm. That's the second takeaway. Let's be creative. The third thing that we found is we need to put power in local hands and local capability. The stories of success told us that local leadership matters, local decisions are faster and smarter when they're made by people who understand their areas. And our research has reinforced that. So it's not just a political preference about devolution. I think it's an imperative and a necessity that those who take the decisions are local and connected, because local authorities know about their area. And one of the great stories we heard about a success in local ownership was the Commonwealth Games, which was a catalyst for fast-tracking regional transport or city transport upgrades. Local authority had a mandate, had an urgency, and made it happen. That deadline really, really mattered. So when local leaders have the power and authority and the capability to be agile and decisive and innovative, the success story tells us that they are. The fourth thing we heard right at the bottom here, customer-centric approach, or actually creating a North Star for what you're trying to do around the citizen, the passenger, the commuter, and the user of what you do. It's really excited, as we've seen in the UK over the last few years, to get very, very interested in major infrastructure plans that span the UK, and they are ultimately really, really important. But most of our people live and work in cities, and that's where our regional transport investment also needs to happen. In our interviews, one of the things that we absolutely loved and why these success stories are great, we heard that a transport director said they'd noticed that late-night shift workers were getting taxis home at the end of one of their major employees in their region because the buses had stopped running. So they added a late-night bus service. And that completely changed the growth trajectory and the happiness of that community, of the major employer in that region. So decisions like that can't be taken nationally. They have to be taken locally. It's not a £1 billion project, a modest change that delivered outsized growth and really impacted the lives of low-income workers who didn't have to spend a chunk of their pay on a taxi home. So the fourth thing is, let's institutionalize a focus on the customer. When we design a system around people, cities, regions, users, the more they use it, the more they'll champion it and get behind what we're doing. Final two things that we saw, and then maybe there's some questions afterwards as a panel. Data and technology. We've heard so much about data and technology in the last couple of days, but what do we really mean and how do we use it? Our regional transport leaders weren't just talking about running trains and running buses. They were talking about becoming orchestrators of mobility in local areas and using data to do that. And there's a real digital revolution that's enabling that to happen. What did that look like in action? Well, one of the transport authorities we spoke to are creating data sets around buses, coaches, trams, bike shares, and ride-hailing services. So as a user, you're seeing an integrated, connected view of mobility in the area. It's not just about their responsibility starting and stopping about the transport that they deliver, but it's about connecting the whole region. Scotland is one of our case studies in the report, and you'll see that one of the regional authorities set common data standards, similar to how TfL did many years ago, across 30 different operators. It gives a passenger a single source of truth about all the bus information in the area. That's the power of thinking like an aggregator and having a data-driven mindset. And then finally, sustainability. So it won't have escaped anybody's attention that transport's the UK's largest emitting sector of greenhouse gases. How do we become sustainable? And nearly every regional authority we spoke to told us that this is at the heart of what they're trying to deliver. Let's get people on public transport. Let's make our services greener and better. So the theme that emerged around sustainable transport solutions was the how. How do you do that? And from talking to local authorities and local regional leaders, we think it means getting granular and practical. Having transport plans that include climate action plans, roadmaps that combine a mix of technologies that are going to be used, the infrastructure needed to make that happen, and then the green financing to join that up as well. And we've learned from going around 14 operators and agencies that different places have different answers. Some transit authorities are finding a blend of hydrogen and battery electric buses work best for their terrain. Others go fully electric on all routes. So there's no one size fits all. But we're saying what matters is that each region has a plan and starts piloting now. That's the success story that we heard, and that's the message we got back. So have a plan, map it year by year, demystify lofty climate goals into concrete, sustainable action. And that's it. It's a fantastic report, and we will give you that report online at the end of today. 6 themes. Think of transport as enabling wider growth. Be creative about funding models. Let's empower local people. Let's center on the customer. Let's take a data-driven approach, and let's think about sustainability in everything we do. And that's not just Deloitte saying that in our report. That was from 14 different regions, 16 different transport operators who are really excited about what they do. What the report gives us very finally is a blueprint, we think, and a maturity matrix when you see it about how to build on what's gone well so far across the UK, how to revitalise our cities and regions, and all the good stuff that we know we already do, where we're already acting, and what needs to happen next. We will be launching this report in an hour's time in one of the rooms upstairs. And if you want a copy of the report, you're very welcome to get it from me afterwards. So thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Lots of interesting stuff in there. I'm definitely going to getting a copy of that report. Next up, presentation, Sarah, Andrew, and I forgot your name again. Michael, sorry. We're going to be talking about West Yorkshire Mass Transit. I think, Sarah, you're going to start. Oh, sorry, Stacey, you're going to start.
Okay, I've been called worse. Yeah, great. So, West Yorkshire, hopefully you know where it is, but a little bit of context set in. So, West Yorkshire comprises 5 different local authority areas, Bradford, Leeds, Calderdale, Kirklees and Wakefield, where I'm from, in case the accent doesn't give it away. It's a huge centre of population, so there's over 2.4 million residents, 7 universities, really diverse region. There's over 170 different languages spoken. In terms of GVA, £66 billion GVA, international economy, lots of graduates across those higher educational institutions, and we've got around 300,000 people working in finance and professional services. But as fantastic as West Yorkshire is, we're not performing as well as what we could do. So despite being home to 2.4 million people, the economic outputs and a workforce of over 1 million residents, the productivity gap is around £11 billion, and that's predicted to get greater. And a massive opportunity for us in terms of transforming the economic output is through delivering an integrated transport network, and mass transit as a fundamental enabler of that growth. So late last year, we adopted a local growth plan, which seeks to highlight how, as a region, we are going to deliver economic growth, concentrated on 3 corridors, which, unsurprisingly, is focused on areas where we've got existing concentrations of population, 2 major cities, Leeds and Bradford, and the agglomeration opportunities that we can achieve in terms of connecting the 2 cities to a greater degree. We've got other major towns and cities like Wakefield, Halifax, Huddersfield, each with their own individual potential. And if we connect those towns and cities up, what could we achieve as a region? So that leads me on to mass transit phase 1. So in terms of that local growth plan, it's recognised that mass transit is a central catalyst in terms of realising that growth plan. So in terms of mass transit phase 1, first of all, what I'll say is phase 1's just the start. It's a West Yorkshire proposition which we're going to expand over time, but we've got to start somewhere. And as the concentrations of population, Leeds and Bradford is the centre for us promoting our first 2 mass transit lines. So first of all, we've got the Leeds line, so that crosses the city from north to south, starting at St James's University Hospital to the north of the city, through the Leeds city centre, connecting areas such as Leeds Arena, the retail and business cores, passing by Leeds City Station and then crossing the river to the South Bank area, where there's key growth locations such as Elland Road Football Stadium, and before terminating at the White Rose, which is a shopping centre, but it's also so much more than a shopping centre. Then we've got the Bradford line, so that east to west across the screen. And as I've already said, Leeds and Bradford as 2 major cities in their own right, with a population of over 1.3 million people. There's significant commuter markets in terms of those cities, and also that's where we certainly see the most congested highway routes into Leeds. And then as you head out towards Bradford, there's massive opportunities in Bradford in terms of key growth locations such as Bradford City Centre and Southern Gateway, where there's a massive opportunity that we can use mass transit as an enabler for growth. So in terms of the phase 1 programme, we have just recently launched our consultation feedback report from the first stage consultation that we had last summer. We're seeking to go out to consultation on what our emerging preferred scheme is early in 2026, before then submitting an application through the Transport and Works Act process to gain the consents necessary to construct and operate the scheme, before then hitting that spades in the ground target that you perhaps heard our Mayor Tracy Brabin mention yesterday. That's a key programme driver for us. We will absolutely be hitting that spades in the ground target in 2028, with a view to then operating the first trams early in the 2030s. So, as I've already said, mass transit phase 1 is just the start, and we're really seeing a shift and momentum building. We've got strong support for mass transit, both regionally and nationally, and that strong positive sentiment certainly came through in terms of the consultation feedback that we received last year. Residents really support the Leeds line and the Bradford line, and they can see what a game-changing opportunity it really is for residents in terms of providing access to jobs, access to education, stimulating regeneration opportunity. And we talk about mass transit in the context of people and place, because ultimately, yes, it is a transport intervention, but it's much more than that. It's about providing opportunity for residents. It's about improving outcomes. It's about improving access to skills and education, and ultimately giving our residents the opportunities to access those and to give residents choice. So how are we achieving this? So we are strengthening our partnership approach with government. So we're trailblazing a joint sponsorship arrangement with different departments within government. So we're working with the DfT, MHCLG, the Treasury and IPA in recognition that mass transit is more than a transport intervention. And in order to deliver that, we need to bring different government departments together, different funding pots that we've just been speaking about. We're also starting to engage the market. There'll be opportunities for local supply chains, but we recognise that to deliver such a significant transport intervention, we're also going to need to seek views from international markets as well. So later on this spring, we're going to be launching a market procurement exercise. Alongside that, we're developing a mass transit growth prospectus, and I could probably fill the next 20 minutes talking to you just about that. So if you've got any questions, either during Q&A or afterwards, I'm happy to answer that. But what the growth prospectus is about, really, is about setting a clear vision for how, as a region, we're going to deliver that growth that we anticipate will be unlocked through mass transit, so that we can increase investment into the region. We've got UK Reef in May, hopefully see many of you there, which is the UK's largest real estate conference held in Leeds. And again, West Yorkshire Mass Transit is going to be a big focus for the West Yorkshire Pavilion at that event. So you should see many more events and opportunities to speak to me and colleagues across the team. And then we've got parliamentary and business sector events as well. Alongside the growth prospectus, we're also developing a spatial development framework as a bit of a precursor to a spatial development strategy when we get the powers through deeper devolution and planning reforms. And what that spatial development framework will seek to do is provide a planning policy framework for how we can unlock that growth, but really sort of set the tone in terms of changing the economic geography of the corridors where we're delivering mass transit, to evolve them into economic corridors, not just transport corridors, how we can bring wider social, environmental and economic benefits. And ultimately, that leads to better outcomes. And I've already spoken a little bit about this in terms of how can we effectively bring together transport planning, land use planning, economic growth potential to make sure that we deliver an integrated vision for how we want West Yorkshire to change, and how mass transit can have a fundamental role in doing that and stimulating or catalysing that growth. So as I've just said, I could talk all day about this, and I'm happy to do so, but I don't want to take over from colleagues such as Andrew, who's now going to talk to us about our sustainability strategy and our approach to placemaking. So,
rattle through. Thank you. We've already heard from our opening remarks about climate, and we've also heard about sustainability being one of those 6 key themes, and we've heard from Stacey about people and place. So how will delivering mass transit contribute to placemaking and regeneration? So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the tools we're using, some of the approaches we're taking, and how we align those outcomes with those growth plans, and how we also illustrate and develop that narrative around business case and the numbers bit to really sort of link it back into that, the people of West Yorkshire and those diverse communities. So our key one really is the sustainability strategy. It's there up at the top, it's there up at the front. It's about delivering against those sustainable outcomes. And those outcomes have been derived from the mass transit vision. We want to hardwire those links. We want to make sure that how we deliver a mass transit is very much driven by these principles. And again, I could spend 20 minutes talking about this, but I'll just pick up the headlines. So we've got 4 key pillars in there. They're about better connectivity, they're about putting people first, they're about environmental responsibility, and about celebrating West Yorkshire. That's both as a place and as a community. Out of that come those pillars, and below that have more diverse, and more detail around what does that mean. What does that sustainability strategy do? How do we do it? In amongst all of that, again, we're developing KPIs to say, well, actually, are we doing it? So we can actually test ourselves against those principles and that strategy as we go forwards. Below that sits the approach to placemaking. So this was consulted on as part of the public consultation held at the end of last year, early this year. And it underpins the sort of thinking to the design. A bunch of little diagrams there just to kind of explain, well, what do we mean? What are we talking about? What are we talking about by green infrastructure and biodiversity? Taking that sustainability theme beyond carbon and beyond biodiversity. How do we understand those neighbourhoods and what do they need? What do they really want to make that place, both physically and as a society, both as an existing community, but as part of those growth plans, as a future community? How do we make sure that we capture that design narrative, and how do we capture that placemaking narrative? How do we feed that into that broader conversation that we have? So under that are 4 design principles: health and well-being, connectivity, identity, adaptability, and resilience. And again, all of those have sort of more detail behind them. What do you mean? How does that feed into the design development process? How does that feed into how we talk to people, and how does it demonstrate that we're delivering that vision? Always like to remind people that infrastructure is for people. We're not just building stuff for the sake of it, it's there for people. And our inclusivity aspect here, the IED strategy, is very much focusing on how do we make it accessible for everybody. And then again, in there, that strategy is about making sure that we do that. It's not about just the words, it's about making those actions real. So what are those elements which underpin an inclusive mass transit design? That all design assumptions and requirements are reviewed from an inclusivity perspective. And one of the, we heard earlier the conversation at the opening session this morning about safety of women and girls. One of the mayor's pledges: how does that happen? How do we really know that we are designing a transport system that is safe for women and girls? And again, I can talk about that a bit later if you wish. But most importantly, getting that stakeholder input into the design development, and West Yorkshire Mass Transit has its accessibility and inclusion meeting group. So we hear from the community, we hear from people, we really get to understand what the local community needs and what their aspirations are, sat within that overall vision. So people-focused, welcoming, usable, future-proof and relevant are some of our key themes. Thank you.
Right, I'm just going to move this on a couple of slides and go forwards before I go backwards again. So, thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Stacey. So my role on mass transit as part of the programme development partner is to support both the combined authority and the programme get set up. So we're currently in the phase of delivering the strategic outline case, and we're now getting ready to prepare for OBC and beyond. And as a sort of a regional organisation, we understand sort of the criticality of kind of getting this right, not just for both the combined authority, but just for kind of people that work and live like close to the regional centre. WICA is on a phenomenal journey at the moment. It's kind of growing at the rate of knots. Part of my role and part of our role, I think, as a programme team, is ensuring there's the right functionality in place to support both the growth of the organisation, increased devolution, whilst making sure we've got the fundamentals in place to actually deliver the programme itself. A big part of what we're doing is following our sort of programme as a system approach, which kind of looks at both sort of creating the optimum environment for delivering the programme. So we're looking at delivering the right outcomes on behalf of the programme and delivering the right outcomes on behalf of the combined authority. And around that is creating the right environment for change and ensuring that the change that we're delivering is both sustainable and can evolve as the organisation does. So the premise of what we do isn't necessarily working through things in a waterfall approach. We understand that the things in programmes sort of interface with each other and interact with each other. So our approach generally kind of looks at that, and then how does it work together as a single whole, hence why we kind of reference it as a programme, as a system. So where we currently are at the moment is sort of WICA are kind of clear about where they want to be going. We're kind of supporting them where they want to be going potentially in the future. So what type of organisation do they want to be in 2 to 4 years' time? And we're ensuring they've got the functions and the people in place in order to do that, which is around defining their operating model for the present and supporting their operating model for the future. So yeah, we'll get beyond that, and we'll ensure that the kind of programme basically works functionally, and there is the kind of right environment to kind of deliver the programme through its life cycles. So going back a slide, I can't necessarily talk without sort of referencing the IPA. So we work very closely with the IPA. A couple of years ago, when we first started supporting the West Yorkshire Combined Authority, the Combined Authority had been through a local gateway review. Part of the local gateway review was a recommendation that we followed the IPA's process for setting up major programmes. So we carried out an initial assessment to understand where the capability gaps are. So route map can be applied in a number of different ways. You can apply it flexibly, or you can work through 3 steps. But fundamentally, what that was able to do is flush out some of the kind of capability gaps that existed within the organisation and build a kind of action plan that we were able to kind of take forward and deliver with both Simon Warburton and the Chief Executive, some of which we're still kind of seeing through at the moment. And yeah, and that's it from my point of view. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Chris, we'll go straight into yours. Stockport.
So, yeah, good morning, everyone. As I said earlier, I'm Chris Barnes, the Network Director for Infrastructure at Transport for Greater Manchester, and I'm really pleased to have been invited to join this morning's session to talk about transport-enabled development and regeneration. So, here in Greater Manchester, we've long recognised the role that our transport infrastructure projects, and in particular our redeveloped transport interchanges, we've long recognised the role they have to play, not just in encouraging people onto more sustainable modes of transport, but also in supporting wider economic growth and urban regeneration. We feel we've got a strong track record in using our transport and infrastructure investment to bring forward a range of wider social and economic benefits by incorporating additional uses in a scalable way to align with differing budget availabilities. So examples of how we've done this include active travel connectivity, and hopefully many of you heard Dame Sarah Story's keynote speech yesterday, which highlighted our exciting active travel mission, but also residential development. So I'm going to talk this morning about a couple of case studies which draw this out, namely Stockport Interchange and Bury Interchange. So the redeveloped Stockport Interchange, which hopefully a number of you have visited, it opened last year, and it's the latest addition to our transport interchange estate. It started out life as a transport interchange only scheme, and that was following the allocation of some local growth deal funding in 2014. But as the development of the scheme progressed, we started looking at how we could incorporate other uses into the scheme to maximise the benefits that could be generated. And this was set particularly in the context at the time of the emerging plans for the new Stockport Merrill Development Corporation, the targeted £1 billion pipeline investment for the town centre, which was in place and backed up by a 130-acre master plan, and also the aspiration to create a complementary walkable neighbourhood that enhanced the quality of life for local people. So, after a lot of work exploring a wide range of potential additional uses with a wide range of partners, so that included Stockport Council, it included the Combined Authority, included the private sector. So after a lot of work, we were able to confirm the progression of a truly mixed-use £120 million development on the site of the previous bus station. The scheme comprised not just a new state-of-the-art transport interchange, but also also a 2-acre public park, 196 residential apartments to be occupied on a private rented basis, and a physical bridge link between the bus interchange and the rail station, aimed at addressing some of the long-standing connectivity issues and challenges that we'd experienced in Stockport over a number of years. It also included a large pedestrian and cycle ramp linking the interchange and the public park to the River Mersey frontage and to the town centre. So it took us quite a while to bring all the constituent parts of the scheme together from both a funding and a contractual perspective. But we were able to draw on a wide range of public sector funding streams. So I mentioned local growth deal funding. We managed to secure some contributions through the government city region sustainable transport settlement. We had some levelling up funding, some active travel funding, transforming cities funding, as well as private sector funding as well. And ultimately, following some strong partnership working, we were able to commence advance works on the scheme in 2021, and then the main contract for delivery with our construction partners, Wilmot Dixon, commenced in early 2022. So here we have daytime and nighttime shots looking down on the new development. These show the interchange and the public park known as Viaduct Park, and they opened in March of last year. So you can see the public park sits on top of the interchange itself, and it wraps around the circular oculus opening. And at the back, you can see the new residential building sat between the Hatworks Museum and the railway viaduct for those of you who know Stockport Town Centre. So here's the residential building in a slightly larger scale. It was delivered as part of the main contract, the main works contract, so with ourselves, TFGM as client, and Wilmot Dixon as the delivery partner, and we handed over to the residential joint venture partners that the public-private partnership which had been assembled for the residential aspect of the scheme, and that combined Stockport Council, the Combined Authority and City Rise Developments, and we handed the residential over to our joint venture partners in May of last year. The residential element of the scheme was funded through a range of funding streams. As is often the case with town centre investments, there were a number of viability challenges that had to be addressed. So in addition to your traditional equity investment and senior debt that you would expect with a residential scheme, we needed to secure some additional grant funding and also some patient equity contributions in order to address those challenges. But I think it's fair to say that the residential development itself was a success. It's known as the interchange, and less than 12 months in, we've got occupancy levels over 90%, and we've got rental values which are in excess of those that were included in the initial appraisal. So these images show the bridgescape, cycling and walking link between the bus interchange and the rail station, which, as I said earlier, has addressed the long-standing connectivity challenges that public transport passengers in Stockport had been experiencing for many, many years. So the structure itself is 44 metres long, 5 metres wide, and it addresses a height differential of 20 metres with CCTV, lighting and segregated surfacing all incorporated within the design. Here we've got the final piece in the jigsaw, in effect, what we call the helix cycling and walking ramp, and that's on the other side of the interchange, and that connects the public park to the River Mersey frontage, to the town centre, and to the wider active travel network, including the Transpennine Trail, and that opened to the public in June of last year. So, what can we point to in terms of the outcomes from this investment, and what benefits have we achieved? Well, of course, we can point to the transport benefits that you would expect from a scheme of this nature, in terms of an improved customer experience, improved perceptions of safety and security, upturns in patronage, and people making conscious decisions to switch to public transport. And I think the launch of bus franchising in Stockport in January of this year has certainly helped with that also. But this good news story, this is very much what our passengers are telling us. It's very much what our staff on the ground are telling us. We undertook some customer satisfaction surveys 6 months after the opening. That showed an increase in overall customer satisfaction of upwards of 50%. And we'll be undertaking some more detailed 1 year in monitoring and evaluation work over the coming months. And there was some really strong social value outcomes as well, and we'll talk about those shortly. But in addition to those transport benefits, we can point to a range of wider social and economic benefits, which the mixed use nature of the scheme has driven as well. So amongst other things, they include driving economic growth in the town centre and land value uplifts. So some analysis by Cushman and Wakefield has pointed to demonstrable increases to the value of both commercial and residential property within a 500-metre radius of the site. We've seen an enhancing of the profile of the town centre, very much as a retail, leisure and residential location. I think everybody who's been to Stockport town centre recently will see it is on the up. It is very much becoming very much a vibrant town centre. It also has pointed to enhancing investor confidence in Stockport as a business destination. And I think the investment in subsequent follow-on mayoral development corporations such as Stockport 8 and Weir Mill very much points to that. And also, I think we can definitely, particularly through the active travel elements of the scheme, we can definitely point to the promotion of healthier lifestyle options within the Stockport community. Yeah. So finally, in relation to Stockport. As I said, we're really proud of the lasting social value legacy that our contractor Wilmot Dixon has left behind in Stockport Town Centre. So that included, amongst other things, 1,657 apprentice weeks, 103 work experience placements, 175 new jobs, and those are sustainable jobs created by Wilmot Dixon and their supply chain, and they have endured permanently beyond the completion of the scheme. And very importantly, that there were over 3,000 connections with young people, about the scheme itself, but very much about the construction industry and attracting the next generation of talent into the construction industry. So what's next for us, for Transport for Greater Manchester? For Greater Manchester, from a transport interchange perspective, well, our next redeveloped interchange will be in Bury Town Centre. We've been allocated money for that in the DfT's City Region Sustainable Transport Settlement Fund. And once again, this project started out life as an interchange-only scheme with dedicated transport funding. But I think it's fair to say the overwhelmingly positive feedback and recognition of the wider benefits generated through the Stockport scheme, together with obviously there's an increasing focus on driving development adjacent to transport nodes, both locally and nationally. That's led us to start looking really seriously about how we can increase the mixed use aspects of the Bury interchange scheme as well, with a particular focus on incorporating residential development into the scheme. So we've still got a lot to do. Not least we need to secure a funding package to support the residential aspects of the scheme in the face of similar viability challenges that we faced at Stockport. But I think it's fair to say we've got a good foundation to work from in terms of work we did on Stockport. We've got a model that we know works, and things are moving in a positive direction. So hopefully we're at the start of another transformational journey. So as we say, watch this space, and thank you all.
Thank you, Chris. Well done. We've got 15 minutes left, but before we kick off to the floor for Q&A, there's a few things that stand out to me through all the presentations. I think starting with Ryan and then feeding into what you guys have said about what's happening in West Yorkshire and also Stockport and Bury, is delivery mechanisms. The what and the why is the easy part. It's the how. And I think I guess directed at you, Ryan, some of the stuff that you were talking about, the innovative finance mechanisms that you've come out with, that you've discovered through your reporting. Is that detailed in your report? Is that something that can be replicated? Is that easily understandable by people from the work that you've done?
Yeah, we've got loads of different stories about different innovative financial models. We had some of them there around, joint ventures, yes, and public and private partnerships. We've seen asset sale and leasebacks, and some of these have got dirty terms associated in history, right? So you need an intelligent client in the middle navigating through. I think the benefit of hearing stories like Stockport Interchange and Bury Interchange and West Yorks and some of the stories we've got is that the real experiences and the real outcomes of being innovative and what it really meant to public finance and how it accelerated. And it will be probably slightly different for different mechanisms and different types of opportunities, but there is some creativity that's going to be needed in the next few years to get schemes like Bury off the ground and replicate Stockport in Greater Manchester and fulfil what West Yorks wants to achieve as well.
Yeah, especially when you're looking at multiple funding sources for various different things, it can get quite complex. I think, and you touched on in your programme how important it is to join up all of those things. And I think, Chris, there's a development corporation for Stockport. Do you see that as a critical mechanism for delivery?
I think it was really important. As we say, it was a very complex set of funding arrangements that we had to bring into place, both public and private sector, and that involved lots of different agencies, lots of different organisations, and I think the drive from the Mayor Development Corporation, the ability of the MDC to bring all those agencies together, to work with those agencies in helping us think creatively about the funding package for the scheme, about being able to, in terms of putting all the component parts together, enable for everybody to work collaboratively. I think the MDC played a major role in that. And in the end, we did have to come up with some quite creative thinking around that, particularly in terms of addressing the residential viability challenges. So we managed to secure some brownfield funding, also some housing infrastructure funding through Homes England. In terms of the joint venture partnership that the public sector parties in the joint venture partnership, they took on some patient equity to help bridge the viability gap. And I think if we hadn't had the MDC bringing all those parties together and really driving that, I think it would have been an even greater challenge than it was.
Yeah. Stacey and Michael, you considering the same sort of mechanisms within West Yorkshire Mass Transit?
I think there's an assumption at the moment where the funding is going to come from, I think, for the scheme. But I think what we're doing is ensuring there are the right mechanisms in place to be able to sort of, go and seek either an alternative funding or manage the funding should it come from a single source. Yeah. So partly what we've set up, and Stacey referenced it, is a joint sponsorship board. So we're working very closely with government to define what the combined authorities relationship is with government, and so should we need to go down that alternative route, then we'll be able to, and it's done in a way that's aligned across sort of funding parties. And it's also around sort of establishing sort of clear governance for the combined authorities. Should sort of alternative funding mechanisms come into play, then they can actually manage that and draw down from that. But ultimately, there's an assumption. should something else happen, then we've got the mechanism in place to manage it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think what also, just to add to what Michael's just said, is that is what the growth prospectus is about. Recognising that mass transit on its own can do so much, and the Treasury are only likely to fund so much. So part of it's about thinking about how we generate a local contribution to deliver mass transit. But when we also think about the wider growth, urban realm improvements, how we can bring forward related infrastructure and how we fund that, that's a significant part of the growth prospectus, looking at the funding and finance delivery models around how we bring forward that delivery of related infrastructure alongside mass transit.
Yeah, and I was thinking about that in related to the spatial development framework for the corridor. In that, is there a consideration of a target density within that corridor to be able to balance that cost revenue subsidy formula? Is there additional revenue sources linked to that through land value capture or something like that? That is part of that funding mechanism?
Yeah, so we are doing work around land value capture, but so it's interesting from Manchester example, because in West Yorkshire there's land value differences, quite significant land value differences. When you look at the mass transit lines across Leeds and Bradford, there's pockets of significant deprivation where we're actually bringing forward housing developments at a sort of traditional 40 dwellings per hectare density that the market wants to deliver. It's challenging, in developments that don't incorporate affordable housing or deliver green space, because developers can't afford to do it because land values are so low. So mass transit is sort of part of the solution to that, because mass transit can uplift land values, but on itself, it's not the only sort of single, solution to that problem.
Yeah, but it creates the critical mass for people to be there to generate the interest in development and stimulate that. So we've got about 10 minutes left. Hopefully you've all been writing down questions. We've got roaming mics. Do you want to open the floor for questions? Everyone happy with that? I think the first one here, lady in the white jacket. I'm not going to choose. The guy with the mic can choose.
Thank you. Hi, my name's Katie Holland. I'm from Turner and Townsend. One of the things, a really great presentation. Thank you very much. And I've worked in capital delivery now for 22-ish years. And one of the things that I love about capital delivery is that it's an opportunity to kind of go in and you've got a lovely clean slate and it's a great vision and it's a really exciting time. You're going to make transformation and change. But if I'm being honest about my own local area, there have been some brilliant projects done, but then 15 years down the line, all the great vision and the outcomes and the thought and passion and everything that went in at that capital delivery stage has been completely lost in, I don't know, Sainsbury's didn't work with the council, so therefore all the parking spaces have magically disappeared, and and then we've created a massive parking problem in the area, and it's just loads of little things like that, and particularly talking about, I don't know, women's safety was mentioned, for instance, the extra lighting that was put in, then actually when it came to the operational side, no one knew what it was for, so it never got switched on. There's thousands and thousands of examples of that. So I just really wanted the panel's view on kind of how do we make the shift from this amazing thinking and energy and passion that goes into creating these brilliant outcomes and ideas? How do we make sure they stay in place for the next 20 years without getting lost in the melee of kind of, and the challenges of real challenges?
Please. Mr. Sands, please go to reception.
Oh dear.
Mr. Sands, please go to reception.
And we all know what that means in the industry, don't we?
Good question. How do you maintain the longevity of what you've originally planned over time, so that it doesn't get diluted and things that were part of the brief originally start to fall away and it becomes less than what it was? Chris, anyone? Stacey?
I think from our perspective, we very much looking purely from a transport perspective, we're very keen on making sure that the local community are invested in the facilities that we provide. So when we develop our transport interchanges, we're very keen to consult with the local community to understand what their requirements are, to help them inform the design, inform how it works, so that there's actually a sense of community ownership for the facilities, and that in many ways that helps in terms of how it's respected and managed over the term, and the community feeling it's not just something that has been done to them, that they've had a role to play in that. I think if we go back to the first bus station I project managed was Hyde bus station in the mid-2000s, and we had an idea about incorporating a stained glass image in the scheme, and we had a lot of people saying, why on earth, how, what a ridiculous idea, it won't last 2 minutes. But actually, it was developed in conjunction with the local community. The design was developed in conjunction with a local school for children with special educational needs. And actually, it's been respected over the course of the last 20 years because there's a sense of community pride and community ownership in that. So we're very keen to reach out to the local community and continually encourage their involvement and input into our schemes, so that hopefully those are respected over the longer term.
I agree with that. So I think we talk in West Yorkshire a lot about civic pride, for the same reason, people expecting better, wanting better, and therefore looking after infrastructure to a greater degree. And I think reflecting on my time in local government, what you often see because of austerity is you get capital projects, but nobody's thinking about revenue cost, and at a local level, there's just not the authority. I mean, not the budget in place to maintain assets. So, from a mass transit perspective, of course, we're thinking about operational costs and sort of future maintenance liability and things. But actually, the way that we approach capital projects in little pots, actually, we need to think about whole systems and how cities, towns work together, not just individual projects and how they operate. It's more about how, as a collective, do they come together to deliver places that people want to live, work in, and take that civic pride in.
Yeah, okay, excellent. Next question, there was a hand over there. 2 minutes, people.
Thank you. Chris Wood from WSP. I thought really excellent presentations, and Ryan, looking forward to reading the report later today. But my question was around some of the challenges that the combined authorities will have in delivering some of these large investments that we need, and some kind of views about the way that they can be resolved and the kind of role of industry in helping support that delivery.
You want to take that one?
I mean, from your point of view, it's probably better from my point of view from what I'm saying. I think just sort of generally the way we're kind of looking at the moment, there are challenges around sort of capability and capacity, I think, within the region. I think both in sort of growing an organisation that will eventually need to operate a mass transit system, potentially alongside bringing in buses. So you've got to sort of build that capability both within the organisation, and you've got to find those people within the region. And therefore, you've got to make it a sort of an attractive place to sort of work, live. So those people kind of will want to kind of stay within those kind of within the likes of West Yorkshire Combined Authority. I think, therefore, there needs to be a real sort of tension between both the Combined Authority and the supply chain to support that growth and that sort of to support it so it grows sustainably, and sort of leaning on the supply chain to learn. And I think that needs to be done in a really considered way. But I see ultimately that being the sort of main challenge at the moment, or one of the main challenges, I think, from my point of view.
Yeah, and I think building on that, from our perspective in Greater Manchester, I think that the challenge for us is very much we've talked about our interchange schemes today, but our transport infrastructure pipeline is is extremely varied. So yes, we've got new interchanges, but we've got we've got several £100 million of investment in on-highway bus infrastructure. We talked about Dame Sarah Story's active travel mission. We've got significant investment in active travel. We've got work on our our rail station on the rail station estate as part of our wider integration aspiration. We are, like West Yorkshire, we're building up plans for future rapid transit as well. So from our perspective, historically, for many years, our capital programme was 90% Metrolink extensions, and we had a very successful model for that, where we had a delivery partner and a construction partner, and that worked really well for multiple extensions. But our pipeline isn't like that now. As I said, there's a whole range of different delivery models, some of which we'll deliver solely as a client, some of which we'll deliver in conjunction with or through local authority partners or train operators or Network Rail. So we have to have a flexible set of delivery model arrangements which work for individual programmes. And I think from our perspective, as we look at that expanded pipeline as we move to the Great Manchester Integrated Settlement and incorporate CRSTS2 funding into that, I think we need to recognise, and we do recognise, we haven't got all the answers. We need to work with our supply chain partners to get early input into how that might work. So certainly from my personal perspective, really keen to have conversations with anybody in the room who'd like to be part of that conversation.
Can I just back that up very quickly as well? Very quickly. I think we found that where regional transport operators and authorities had made the most progress the most quickly, there was 3 things were true, and it's in the report. The first is there was a strong visionary leader that thought big picture. You've seen that in Manchester, we've seen it elsewhere, but thinks about the joined-up network and doesn't just build a bridge between the railway station and the bus station in Stockport, but thinks about the bigger picture. The second thing that I think comes across really clearly is the alignment of incentives, not just in the local authority, but with the supply chain as well, whether that's a regional or a residential JV or one of the supply chain operators, a civil engineering company. So alignment with the supply chain. And then the third thing, I think, is they don't just look at the limitations of capacity in their own organisation. We've just heard they think about the supply chain's capacity as well. So they think bigger picture. They think, how do I aggregate the sum of the parts here so I can deliver on this vision and give everybody a slice of the pie in a way that benefits the community as a whole. Those 3 things generally were true in every one of the successful stories we saw.
Brilliant. I think that's a perfect way to end those 3 key lessons. We've run out of time. It's amazing how fast an hour goes. If you have a burning question that you didn't get to ask, tackle them before they leave that door. But most of us will be around for the day, I think. But thank you. So if you could just thank all of our panelists for the amazing presentation and discussion.